Hello everyone, my name is Nikki Giron if you are new here, and on this channel we talk about a bunch of things: vintage, music, antiques, I sing a little bit, I play some sax and more, but today we're going to be doing a music story time, so stick around. And if you are returning, thank you so much for being here. I love you and appreciate you so much. Seriously, yeah. It means a lot, seriously. But all right, let's dive right in. So today we're going to be doing a music story time by sharing the story of the woman who sang one of the most iconic songs of all time, The Girl from Ipanema. Most likely you've heard this song, and I did a cover of it if you want to check it out. Just saying. Today we will be talking about the incredible Astrud Gilberto. She was known as the Queen of Bossa Nova, but she wasn't always honored with that name. So more on that later. So you should stick around because we're going to talk about why. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a beat. And I feel the need to tell her story because she faced a lot of misogyny and ridicule during her active years in music. And I want people to be aware of her story and give her the proper credit that she deserves. I feel by bringing attention to her journey, we can shed light on the challenges that women like me or other women might face in music, but also just in any industry sometimes. It's a struggle out here, I'm not gonna lie. Who was Astrud Gilberto? So, Astrud Gilberto, she was a Brazilian singer best known for her distinctive and soothing voice, you know it, as well as her contributions to Bossa Nova in general. And I will also give her credit for being one of the biggest reasons why Bossa Nova spanned across the world. Astrud Evelangina Weinhardt was born on March 29th, 1940 in Bahia, Brazil. Her father, Fritz Weinhardt, and he was a language professor and a musician, while her Brazilian mother, Evelangina Weinhardt, her mom, was also a musician, and her mom also pursued a career in education alongside her husband, Fritz. And it's worth noting that their musical background will become significant in Astrud's story later, and she was the youngest of three sisters. Astrud's childhood was very rich in education. Since her parents were both educators, and her dad being a language professor, she actually grew up to be fluent in Japanese, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and English. Wow, that's a lot of languages. We love her. We are here for it. And the fact that she speaks English will be really, really important to her story later on when it came to the creation of The Girl from Ipanema and how that went down. So I couldn't really find much on her childhood, specifically kind of like, school she went to or, just like details on her childhood. There wasn't really any significant events that I could find. The only thing that I could really find was that when she was 8 years old, her family moved to an oceanfront home in Rio de Janeiro. And this is where she studied at Colegio de Alpacao. But anyway, in the late 1950s and during her teenage years, she became friends with a singer named Nara Leao. Through this connection, she was introduced to Rio's musicians. She was able to be introduced to a lot of the world of Bossa Nova in the early years in the 1950s. And among this Bossa Nova music scene that she was being exposed to is where she met her would-be, eventually be her husband, Giron Gilberto, one of the most iconic Bossa Nova guitarists of all time. Astrud and João were from the same Bahia area state. Gilberto had also gone from Bahia to Rio, but this was because he was facing challenges in his career. He was dismissed from a band due to unreliability in rehearsals. Following the setback, this is when he devoted months to living with his sister, and this is when he really started to hone in on the genre and started to create this kind of romantic music that we hear today. I did find a quote from her, though, that encapsulates maybe what her teenage years were like, and it's, quote, "In my mid-teens, I was part of a gang of youngsters who were involved with music. Through them, I met Giron Gilberto, who invented the concept of Bossa Nova. We were married, and I sang at home with João and did a couple of college concerts with him as a special guest." End quote. In 1959 is when she married Giron Gilberto, and in 1963, when she was just 23 years old, she immigrated to the United States, and then she settled there permanently. So that's a lot to cover of her life in a kind of a short period of time. Before we go on to more about her story, it's really important that we talk about the history of Bossa Nova because it's really important when it comes to talking about Astrud and her story and the story behind The Girl from Ipanema. Bossa Nova emerged in the late 1950s, and this was particularly in Rio de Janeiro, where Astrud was being introduced to early bossa nova. This was a fusion of samba rhythms with influences from jazz, because jazz was poppin' during that time. The exact birth of bossa nova is kind of attributed to a small group of young musicians at the time and composers, including Astrud Gilberto, Antonio Carlos Jobim, and Vinicius de Moraes. I'm gonna give her credit too, because I have a feeling that a lot of this information is skewed. So Astrud Gilberto, he developed this unique guitar playing style by this soft and rhythmic strumming. So his rendition of this song named Chega de Suadade is considered to be one of the first recordings in bossa nova style. Vinicius de Moraes was a poet and a lyricist, and he also wrote the lyrics for The Girl from Ipanema. He collaborated with Jobim on numerous compositions, and this genre quickly became associated with kind of a laid-back lifestyle, and this was kind of in combination with just kind of like Rio de Janeiro and the vibe and the beach culture, and so it kind of just like boomed around the world, and it was very consumable, very bossa nova, boom it up. Now let's move on to the story behind the iconic song The Girl from Ipanema and talk about Astrud's story a little bit further, and this is where we will kind of talk about what happened in the struggle she faced. So a saxophonist named Stan Getz and a jazz producer named Creed Taylor, they were interested in recording bossa nova music because, again, it was booming, and these are American musicians. So they wanted to make bossa nova music with Brazilian musicians, which makes sense. So in 1963, they invited Astrud Gilberto and this multi-instrumentalist and composer, as I mentioned before, Antonio Carlos Jobim, to New York to collaborate. They're just powerhouse. They're all getting together and they're going to record bossa nova music. So this is the start of what is considered one of the most iconic jazz albums of all time, called Astrud Gilberto. Okay, so where does Astrud come into this? Well, remember how I talked about how many languages she spoke? And if you remember, I mentioned it's important to the story that she also spoke English. So Zhao needed a translator because he didn't speak English. And the other people in the studio did speak English, so he needed help. He said, hey girl, you want to translate for me? I don't know why I did that in a country accent. Aight, wifey, I want you to translate for me. You speak English, you're a queen. That's probably not what he said, but let's hope. So he brought along Astrud in New York City in March 1963 at A&R Recording Studios, just a few weeks before her 24th birthday. So the people who actually wrote and composed this song was Carlos Jobim, and then the lyricist, again, Vinicius de Moraes. Side note about this song is that it's actually about a real girl that they saw on the beach. So Jobim and Moraes, they envisioned The Girl from Ipanema when they went to record it for the Astrud Gilberto album as a duet. And they were originally going to have it be a duet between Astrud Gilberto and this Brazilian singer-songwriter named Miele. But during the recording session, I guess Taylor Creed, who, remember, he was the producer for this album, he kind of was like, hold on. He was sitting there and he suggested that Astrud actually sing the song. There's also a lot of just misinformation about like who decided that she was going to sing on the song. Some people say it was the producer. Some people say that it was her who suggested it. We don't really know. So this wasn't planned. It wasn't planned for her to sing on this song. And that's important to the story as well, because credits and money, but we'll talk about that later. While she was not pursuing a professional singing career by any means, she still had sang professionally and in professional settings, and her parents were both musicians, so she was heavily involved in music growing up anyway. But she delivered the performance, and it captured the song's dreaminess, romantic, somewhat creepy atmosphere, and her singing on this song contributed to its success. And I know you can say, what if someone else sang? I'm sorry. She's the reason why this song was successful. I'll just say it. And the song was good. That was the cherry on top. That was the I don't know. But following the recording sessions, The Girl from Ipanema was included on the Astrud Gilberto album, and that album was released in 1964, so just a year later. And the album was an instant sensation. People loved it. So The Girl from Ipanema obviously emerged as a standout track on the album, and this really started like Astrud Gilberto kind of like being in the limelight per se. And upon its release, the song quickly went to the top of the music charts worldwide, and it became an international sensation. And I would argue it's still an international sensation. But its success transformed Astrud into a household name, and it really solidified her stance in what she contributed to Bossa Nova. But despite the song's overwhelming success, Astrud actually faced a lot of scrutiny. She received a lot of criticism because she didn't have formal vocal training, and people were just being snobby about it, and they kind of just dismissed her completely and dismissed her contributions to the song, and also just dismissed her entire, like, the fact that she literally was one of the biggest reasons why Bossa Nova was exposed to the world. And the fact that she sang The Girl from Ipanema in English, they said it eluded the Bossa Nova genre. It was innovation, and people didn't like it, essentially. And they didn't like that she wasn't like everybody else. The Brazilian media especially was criticizing her, saying, again, she's not a jazz singer. She said, I never was trying to be a jazz singer. And they weren't nice. They were not nice to her, and she said later it really actually hurt her feelings. And so remember how I mentioned she was just in the studio. Apparently, and this is going to blow your mind, do you guys know how much she was paid? Remember, she doesn't have any credits on this song. She doesn't get any royalties. She never got any royalties from this song, as far as we know. She was reportedly paid just $120. I'll let you just sit on that. Despite it being an instant hit. It even went on to win Grammys. It was during the year The Girl from Ipanema's super success. Her and Zhao actually separated. Their kid said in a 2019 Facebook post that they were just separated, that they never actually divorced, but they were still separated. So this was obviously a really tough time for her. Not only is she being scrutinized by the media, she's also going through a breakup at the same time. And so she just has to keep going. And during this time, she's in America still, and so Stan Getz, the saxophone player on The Girl from Ipanema, the Getz Gilberto album, asked if she wanted to join his band. And so she reluctantly decided to, and that didn't go along very well because a lot of people thought that there was something going on between them two, and people weren't very nice about it. But this is where it gets really interesting because Stan Getz did not have her best interest in mind. He had an interview with UK Magazine in 1966 with Jazz Professional, and apparently he claimed that he was the reason why Astrud was successful. It was him. And Astrud had a response to this eventually, expressed her frustration, stating, quote, "The funny thing is that after my success, stories abound as to Stan Getz or Creed Taylor having discovered me, when in fact nothing is further from the truth. I can't help but feel annoyed at the fact that they resorted to lying. Well, she was just a wife and blah, blah, blah." And he's just gross. The way he acted was gross. And they were lying. They wanted to take full ownership of her success. This is the first time she was kind of just screwed over. Well, not first time. I guess the second time she was screwed over by the music industry, just by men being gross. And so she decided to leave the band, and then she works on her own albums again. And this is from 1965 to 1961. She made 8 solo albums. So one of these albums was the Astrud Gilberto album, and this actually earned her a Grammy nomination for Best Vocal Performance. The Shadow of a Smile, Look to the Rainbow, Beach Samba, A Certain Smile, A Certain Sadness, Windy, so on and so forth. So she also worked with people like Gil Evans during this time. But apparently she always said that she did not receive credit or compensation for her production work in these spaces. She actually found that her music would be redistributed and repurposed in different packages. She literally wasn't being paid properly by any of the things that she did after 8 albums. And this is the problem too, was she made the mistake of recording a lot of these things without a contract. And this is the same thing that she did with The Girl from Ipanema, but that makes a little bit more sense. But the thing is, with contracts, especially back then, it was so easy to grab people that were vulnerable to the industry. And she said at one point, quote, "I was inexperienced and didn't realize you're supposed to insist on credits." And apparently her family also claims that she did not receive full payments on her 1972 album either. In her 1977 album, The Girl from Ipanema, she re-recorded versions. So people took high advantage of her in the music industry all the way in the 70s. It's like she couldn't win. No matter what she did, no matter what she tried, even as many albums as she did, it was like she couldn't catch a break. In some kind of way, it was either she wasn't paid correctly or Stan Getz is over here being. So she decides she went on hiatus and she said, "Girl, I'm not recording again for 10 years." And I cannot blame her. She did not record again for 10 years after all this stuff went down. So then in 1987, she records Astrud Gilberto plus James Last Orchestra, and this is when George Michael said, "Ooh, girl, I like her. She's amazing. Loved her singing." They went on to record a charity record, so on and so forth. So this was kind of a little bit better time in her career, but obviously it was still very hard for her. And it was following a concert in 1965 that she actually never sang in Brazil again. Albums in Japanese. This woman was incredible. And it's crazy to me that her story has been so warped to the point because of Stan Getz saying, I discovered her and I'm the reason why she's successful, or I'm the reason, you know, for all these things, that they never just, no one really like told her, like really put her success in the forefront and gave her the proper credit. So she had a lot of great times later on in her kind of career. So in 2002, she was inducted into the International Latin Music Hall of Fame. And this is when she announced that she was going to be taking an indefinite time off from public performances after 4 decades of playing clubs and festivals. So she was playing like around, making music, playing clubs and festivals, but again, just she wasn't having I think she was still being affected by the stuff that happened in the beginning of her career too, because I feel like that would be trauma, like emotional damage, am I right? I mean, this was like the 90s at this point, late 80s, 90s, and people still like weren't giving her credit. So in 2002, this was the year that she was admitted into the International Latin Music Hall of Fame, and this is when she actually announced that she was taking indefinite time off from performing. And I don't blame her. In retirement, she grew interested in philosophy and painting, and then she campaigned against cruelty to animals, said that she did not miss the stage and her ill treatment by record companies. And girl, I do not blame her. This is where we kind of get to the end of her story. She really, really made a splash in the world, and because she was a woman and people thought she was just Zhao's wife, she had a really hard time. And I think that there's no denying that, and I think we need to recognize that she was an icon, but that the stories are twisted because of Stan Getz, because of the media kind of twisting like her story. So I'm telling her story the way that it was meant to be told, and I'm telling the truth. The past few years before she had passed away had been really difficult for Astrud. So I read as well that in 2016, they did play The Girl from Ipanema at the Olympics in Rio, but she wasn't present. She was really hurt by Brazil because this was also where she came from and where this music came from. It makes me really sad. It was stated that she really was affected by this because it really affected her ability to trust people, because she kept just being screwed over by record labels, by people, by band leaders. But she lived by herself in an apartment. Apparently she had an apartment overlooking the river and had a kitty cat, and she would, you know, call her kids and talk to them, and her spirit, I think, was just kind of broken down. And the thing is she tried. You just break. She did have 2 kids, but it's just really sad, and I'm sorry to like end it on a bummer, but we're not going to, because this is about a celebration. Because she wasn't celebrated, I'm gonna celebrate her here, because Astrud Gilberto spoke 5-6 languages, did songs in Japanese, did songs in different languages, made one of the most iconic songs of all time, made Bossa Nova spread across borders, had an incredible voice. At the end of the day, I feel like we can still look at her and be inspired by who she was and her resilience in the beginning of her career. Because honestly, I don't think anybody would keep going after all that. So on June 5th, 2023, Astrud Gilberto passed away at the age of 83. Man, she left behind a legacy still. Like, man, I feel like though she may be gone, her voice and spirit live through her music. It ensures that she will never be forgotten and her music will never be forgotten. She was an incredible woman. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the life and legacy of the incredible Astrud Gilberto. May her music continue to bring you joy and inspiration. And I really enjoyed telling her story, and I'm really honored to tell her story. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.